SGA as a sophomore, and Emma and I decided to run together because we've been in SGA and we know what it's like, and we also know how it can be wielded as a tool if wielded properly. And we were really frustrated with the progress that was made in the last couple of years. We felt like we had two or three major ideas and about 30 smaller different things that we wanted to do, and we were like, we have these ideas, we know how to do it, we should run now. Because to us, there's no point waiting if that was the case, right? And one of the major components of our platform is strengthening the level of inclusivity at Davidson, and a lot of that was sparked after the anti-Semitic events of last semester. I'm not sure how much you got when you weren't on campus.
I heard about it,
right? Yeah. It's really hard to talk about the experience. I don't know. I hate to say as a Jewish student because I don't want to make an appeal based off of my identity like that, but there was an emotional response from a lot of students, Jewish and not Jewish, and I want to take a crack at that using SGA because I feel like the response wasn't effective enough, like across the board, not just in SGA, but that SGA could actually make a difference. And I can talk about some of our platform and what we want to do specifically, but I don't know if you have other.
Yeah, why don't you get into more of your platform, and then I can ask some follow-up questions.
Yeah, sure. On the inclusivity side, we want to increase or reform the way the community justice equality rec is applied. So, for instance, I took an econ class my first year, which counted for that rec, but it didn't actually cover any issues of like diversity and inclusion. So we want to tighten it so that it applies directly to classes that matter in that sense. So you can't leave Davidson without having first taken a class that literally forces you to confront these issues. Like obviously that's not going to stop Nazis from being at our school, but it's gonna say that like this is something we care about and this is something we should learn about. We've worked with Emmitt and I have worked with Common Ground in the past, and we think that organization can be really powerful because it represents the inclusion organizations at our school. But right now, it exists without like direction, and we want to give it direction by bringing it into the fold of SGA and say like, hey, we want to support you in every way we can, but we can't lead the charge on this. So we want to work with you. Outside of inclusivity, I'm not sure if you got a chance to look at our website or not.
I did, yeah. Okay. I browsed it a little bit.
The three major things we're looking at: Arlo, textbooks, transportation. Arlo is an issue of equity. So if you get an alcohol citation, you're going to pay a $50 fine. That was doubled 2 years ago from $25, and yet the amount of write-ups have stayed the same. So it's not working as a disincentive, and also it's disproportionately impacting students who can't afford to pay for it, or even who can't afford to have someone else pay for it. So like if I got a write-up and I'm fortunate enough to have like my father or mother be able to afford this and pay for me, it doesn't disincentivize me at all. But if I can't afford it, it can be a really big burden on people.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't make sense that Arlo is profiting like $20,000 a year off of like students who break alcohol. Transportation. Em and I set up a shuttle system. I'm not sure if it was on Facebook, and we got about 70, 80 people last semester to take it. So it was a free shuttle from the airport to Davidson. We want to expand that for all breaks. So it would be a shuttle that would take students from Davidson to the airport and the airport to Davidson. And we can use Safe Rides. Do you know what that program is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of the younger students don't, because I think it was used oftentimes to take people to bars, if I'm not mistaken. Really? That's what Chief Sigler told me. He was like, they used to go to some bar. And it still exists as a program, but people don't really know about it, especially the first years and sophomores. So just publicizing it more and potentially utilizing it to bring people into Charlotte. Because we talk about the Davidson bubble so much, and we talk about getting outside of it, but you can't do that if you can't get off campus. And like, I personally don't have a car, and that makes it really difficult.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is perhaps one of the bigger things is textbooks. So right now, Lulabells, you can go and you can rent a textbook for 3 days, which is awesome. That's a really good resource for people. But for most textbooks, there's only one, and 3 days sometimes isn't enough. So like if you're in a big lab science class, one person can rent it, but if it's for your final, like multiple people are probably going to want to be able to use this resource. So we think we can take funds and direct it towards purchasing the most commonly used and reused and the most expensive books to bolster Lulabelle's supplies, and then extend the rental period for some of these books to a full semester. So instead of going to the bookstore at the beginning of the semester and paying, I can't remember what my cost, around $350 worth in textbooks, well, maybe you can pay $100 and you can get the bigger, more important ones at Lulabelle's. That would be the goal. That's the main stuff. I can talk about some other things. But
Awesome.
Sorry,
yeah, could you just like detail or just like at least touch on like a few other of your campaign platforms?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things we were looking at as well is the way student athletes exist on this campus is really difficult because they're expected to be both athletes and students. And so many of us who are just, I'm just a student. I don't know if you're an athlete or not. So many of us as just students, really struggle to succeed in classes without the other additional difficulty of being an athlete, right? And so one of the policies that's in place, and it's been in place since the 80s, is how many excused absences you get as an athlete, and it's 3 Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And even though the schedule for athletics has gotten way bigger in the last 40 years, the amount of excused absences hasn't changed. We want to look at that and see if we can make it a little bit more flexible. That's a big goal, and it's a complicated one, so there are other ways we think we can approach it as well. So we think we can look into making office hours more accessible for athletes. We think we can look at the meal times, and that's going to apply to both students and athletes. One of the problems last year that we addressed through SGA was that a lot of first years in particular, because of the meal swipe time being restricted, couldn't come from practice and go to a meal because there wasn't a time for them built into the schedule. But meal accessibility is really important for everyone. It's important that we can all get meals like when we need to get them. And food in general is a pretty common concern that I think Davidson students like to talk about. The quality of food, whether we have fruit in commons, whether we have meal swipes for Lulabelles. It would be really cool if one day we could expand the pot that you can donate to for extra swipes. Outside of food, I can consult with the website. The ideas we had are mostly centered around how do we make SGA matter, right? Like how do we give it purpose? Because, I have worked well and loved Alex, who was SGA president 2 years ago, and it's Siri, who's SGA president now. But I feel like sometimes we waste the potential of SGA, and that's because we're not using it in ways that matter to students. We have lofty ideals, but not direct action.
So how concretely are you going to make SGA an effective driver of change?
Like what steps we'll take to, so it's about being the bridge between students and the administration. So for the RLO plan, I talked to Dean McCrae about it today, and he's receptive to changing the policy. Now, that's not a simple task. We're going to have to sit down and talk, and then we'll bring it to the Student Conduct Council, which will then reevaluate the policy and change it. That's the mechanism in which that happens. With textbooks, we'd have to look and talk with Lulabelle's, the entity itself, and work within that budget. But we can also look for funds within the president's office budget and the dean of students budget, and potentially even ATC for funding. The ideas that we've picked because we feel that we have a direct way to actually make them happen. And that's the same with transportation. We know we can do it because we've done it once before. We just want to expand it and make it accessible for everyone. Now, there is an aspect of SGA that's not all, tangible step by step, this additional thing. Like when there were anti-Semitic events last semester, it was important that SGA was should be there to stand for students and to show that they're supported in this community. There's that aspect as well. And while it's more difficult to describe the exact ways in which that's done, we think we'll be successful in doing that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you see SGA connecting with students, or kind of bridging the gap between the student body and SGA, and reassuring students that SGA is actually doing something? Because there's a lot of people who think oh, SGA, it's ineffective, it's whatever,
or at least not transparent enough.
Exactly.
There's a I think rightful conception in the student's mind right now built off of a lack of connection between students and SGA, and that's what you're highlighting, I think. There are a couple ways we can do that, and I think actually the first way starts internally, and that's making sure that SGA is fully attended and fully staffed. So this last year there was trouble with even having all the senators there, and we're going to be really, really accountable when it comes to those sort of things and making sure people show up. Because when people show up, there should be the effect where more things get done, where more things happen. Now that doesn't solve the full problem of transparency, and what we want to do is establish a newsletter, either weekly or bi-weekly, that goes through all 8 or 9 of the committees that we're going to set up and the progress that they had for the week, and that serves the double purpose of both keeping those committees accountable because they're people actually like reading what they're doing, so you can't do nothing for 3 weeks because people aren't going to see that. And that started with the Davidsonian too. When you guys published the attendance, like people who didn't show up, their friends gave them shit for that, and that's good.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, accountability is for sure good.
Right, and that keeps us as SGA president and VP, if that happens, in check as well, because that makes sure we have to get the job done or people are going to be mad at us. And that gets at this idea that like people really haven't used SGA as well as it could have been used in the past.
Absolutely. Last question.
Yeah.
So this is about you and your running mate.
Yeah.
Why do you think you work well together?
Yeah. Oh God. Emma Lynn and I met on the first week of our first year here. We decided to run together because we had been in SGA and we had been outside of SGA, and we realized that the ideals that we shared when it came to both our friendship and how we worked together were ones that we think could translate really well to a working relationship as well as like a friendship, and then become an effective, hopefully, administration. I can't speak more highly of Emma. We're so close. She and I took a 10-hour road trip last semester. We drove to New York. This random story. My synagogue somehow hosted like Bill Clinton, and they got him to speak. So we were like, that would be really cool if we went up to go hear him speak. So we just drove up there for 2 days. And that working relationship is so important when it comes to SGA because you're really doing so much together, so much of the time for an entire year that you have to be able to do that. And I think we'll do that well.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything else you want to say? Any final thoughts?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Is there anything you feel like you need? I want to make sure, like, when it comes to the article or something.
I think I have everything, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think we hit on all the points I was looking for.
Awesome.
So, yeah,
Sweet.
thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate you taking